There is a building at 7 Burlington Gardens, London. It sits at the corner of a narrow block directly adjacent to Savile Row, the most famous bespoke tailoring street in the world. The building is 400 years old. Its walls are Grade 2 listed. For years, it was occupied by Abercrombie and Fitch, an American fashion company that planted its flag on the edge of British tailoring's most sacred address. Abercrombie eventually left. The building sat empty. Then, in 2026, something moved in to replace it. Not a tailor, not even a clothes shop, a restaurant, 3 bars, a wine room, and a caviar bar in the basement, designed by Foster & Partners, one of the most prestigious architecture firms in the world. The American company behind it is called RH. You may know it by its old name, Restoration Hardware. This is the story of how America is quietly taking over Savile Row and why the tailors who built its 300-year reputation cannot stop it. To understand what is happening on Savile Row right now, you have to go back to 2013. That was the year Abercrombie and Fitch opened a store at 7 Burlington Gardens. If you were on the street at the time, you would have noticed something immediately: the music. Abercrombie was famous for blasting its stores with bass-heavy sound systems, pumping fragrance into the air, and using dramatically lit corridors as a kind of theater for its brand. It was the loudest thing that had ever happened near Savile Row. The tailors were not pleased. Abercrombie represented everything that Savile Row had spent 3 centuries defining itself against. Where the Row dealt in silence, patience, and individual craft, Abercrombie dealt in volume, speed, and mass production. Where a Savile Row suit took between 80 and 200 hours of handwork to complete, hours spent on floating canvas construction, hand-padded lapels, and hand-stitched buttonholes, Abercrombie was selling distressed denim in a room with a shirtless model at the door. The tension was obvious. But here is what people missed at the time. Abercrombie's arrival on Burlington Gardens was not just a cultural clash. It was a signal about who actually owned the street. We will come back to that landlord in a moment. Abercrombie and Fitch ultimately closed its London flagship in 2022. The brand contracted globally, the pandemic accelerated the decline, and the specific combination of loud music, heavy cologne, and 21st century casual fashion proved to be a poor fit for a street that had dressed Winston Churchill, the Duke of Windsor, and every James Bond from Sean Connery onward. The building went quiet. The tailors on the row exhaled. They exhaled too soon. In January 2025, planning applications were submitted to Westminster Council. The firm behind them was Foster & Partners, the architectural practice responsible for London's Gherkin, Beijing's Capital International Airport Terminal 3, and Apple Park in Cupertino, California. The client was RH, formerly Restoration Hardware, an upscale American home furnishings company headquartered in Corte Madera, California. The plans described a transformation of the old Abercrombie and Fitch building, spreading across 3 Grade 2 listed structures into what RH calls a gallery. On the ground floor, a restaurant, a wine bar, and a coffee bar. On the second floor, another wine bar with its own roof terrace. In the basement, a champagne and caviar bar. Not a single suit, not a single tailor, not a single spool of thread. What RH was proposing was the complete conversion of a 400-year-old building adjacent to the world's most famous bespoke tailoring street into an American lifestyle experience. And Westminster Council, after reviewing the plans, gave the green light. Now you might be thinking, it is only one building. It is not even technically on Savile Row itself, just next to it. What does a restaurant on Burlington Gardens have to do with bespoke tailoring? The answer is everything. Because RH is not the only thing that has moved into the block. And the building is not the only thing that has changed. To understand the real story, you need to understand who owns the land. The Pollen Estate. Most people who walk down Savile Row have never heard of the Pollen Estate. They do not know that it owns 38 buildings in East Mayfair, including most of the buildings on Savile Row itself. They do not know that it has been the dominant landowner on this block since 1764, when the estate passed to the Reverend George Pollen and his family. The Pollen name has been on these title deeds for over 250 years. What most people also do not know is who owns the Pollen Estate today. It is not a British family. It is not a London institution. The majority owner of the Pollen Estate, the landlord of Savile Row, is Norway's sovereign wealth fund, formerly known as the Government Pension Fund Global. It is the largest sovereign wealth fund on Earth, with assets exceeding $1.7 trillion. It was built on North Sea oil revenues, and it owns the buildings that house the bespoke tailors of the most British street in the world. Norway's government pension fund is the landlord of Savile Row. Let that land for a moment. And that fund, like any institutional investor, has to make decisions about what generates the best return on its properties. Restaurants, bars, lifestyle brands, and offices generate significantly higher rents than small-batch bespoke tailoring workshops. The math is not complicated, and the results on the street have been direct and documented. James Cottrell is the managing director of Welsh and Jefferies, a military tailor with a history stretching back over 2 centuries. Welsh and Jefferies has dressed officers for generations, producing uniforms and formal wear that represent the most rigorous standards of British military tailoring. When the Pollen Estate announced its redevelopment plans, Welsh and Jefferies was asked to move. Cottrell described the situation directly. The landlord's plan is to squeeze them into smaller and smaller areas. Andrew Ramroop has run Maurice Sedwell on Savile Row for over 50 years. He trained under one of the Row's legendary cutters. He has spent his entire professional life on this street. In 2022, he was told that Maurice Sedwell's premises at number 19 Savile Row were needed. The business was relocated to a back room on the first floor of number 9. The move cost him foot traffic he has never fully recovered. His response when he learned the reason for the relocation, being told he had to leave to make way for a restaurant, was not very encouraging. Joseph Morgan managed Chittleborough and Morgan, one of the Row's most celebrated independent tailors. He had been on Savile Row since 1969. He dressed Elton John. He dressed Mick Jagger. When he saw what was happening to the street, he said this: "The tragedy is that Savile Row will be like any other street in the world. These are not anonymous voices. These are named men with named businesses with decades of documented history on this street. And they are all saying the same thing. The street is being reorganized around them. Ground floor retail, the prime real estate that drives walk-in business and visibility, is going to restaurants, wine bars, and lifestyle brands. Tailors are being moved upstairs, downstairs, and further back. Their workshops are becoming invisible, and an invisible tailor on Savile Row cannot attract the new clients it needs to survive." Here is what makes the RH story so significant. It is not just one building. It is the clearest and most visible expression of a pattern that has been building for years. The Pollen Estate has submitted plans to demolish 2 buildings on the Row and replace them with a mixed-use complex. Offices, restaurants, and general retail, with a handful of tailors filling the remaining units. The consultation documents say the estate is committed to keeping the tailors around. The tailors themselves describe what that commitment looks like in practice: basements, back rooms, and first-floor units with no street frontage. Meanwhile, the incoming tenants include a streetwear boutique, a restaurant in the old Kilgour premises. Kilgour's clients once included Fred Astaire, and Kilgour cut his suits to a standard that made him the most elegantly dressed man in Hollywood. And now the crown jewel, a caviar bar, will occupy the building that once housed the most famous American fashion brand on the street. America did not succeed in replacing Savile Row with clothing. So now it is replacing Savile Row with something else entirely. Not fashion, but lifestyle. Not products, but experiences. The suits are still there. They are just harder to find. And that is not an accident. That is a business strategy. The experience economy, which is what RH sells, what luxury restaurant groups sell, what wine bars and caviar bars sell, generates higher revenues per square foot than almost any form of retail. The rents that a tailor paying for a workshop on the ground floor of Savile Row cannot match the rents that a champagne bar can pay for the same space. When the landlord is a $1.7 trillion investment fund, the calculation is simple. The irony is almost unbearable. Savile Row built its global reputation by making things, by cutting cloth, by hand-stitching lapels, by basting canvases and pressing seams. The street's entire identity rests on the idea that the highest form of luxury is not something you buy off a rail, but something that is made for you, specifically by a person who has spent 20 years learning how to do it. And now, the buildings that house those people are being converted, floor by floor, into places where wealthy visitors can drink champagne and eat caviar. The luxury is staying on the street. The craft is leaving it. It would be easy to end the story here in full decline, but the situation on Savile Row is more complicated than a simple obituary. In September 2025, Simon Kunde, the managing director of Henry Poole & Company, one of the oldest tailors on the row, gave an interview that stopped the fashion press short. He said that in the previous 18 months, his firm had seen a significant surge in people applying for apprenticeships. Young men and women wanting to learn to cut, wanting to be trained on Savile Row. The craft is not dying from a lack of interest. It is dying from a lack of space. That is the distinction that gets lost in every conversation about Savile Row's future. The demand for bespoke British tailoring is not collapsing. It is, by most accounts, quietly growing. The tailors report strong order books. The apprenticeships are oversubscribed. The customers are there. What is changing is the street they work on, the physical address, the access, the visibility. And once you lose those things on Savile Row, what you have left is just a very good tailor working in a back room somewhere in Mayfair, which is fine, but it is not Savile Row. It is not the street that gave bespoke tailoring its global identity. It is not the place that people fly from Tokyo and New York and Dubai to visit. Without the street, the story changes. The Caviar Bar at 7 Burlington Gardens is open for business. The Foster & Partners design is finished. The wine room is stocked. The roof terrace has its views over the rooftops of Mayfair. Around the corner, on Savile Row itself, the tailors are still there. Henry Poole, Huntsman, Anderson and Shepherd. You can still walk in off the street and commission a suit that will take 6 months to make and cost more than most people's monthly salary. The craft is not gone, but the ground beneath it is shifting. One building at a time, one restaurant at a time, one caviar bar at a time. The first American invasion of Savile Row came with music and cologne, and it failed. The second came with Foster & Partners and a sommelier list, and it succeeded. The difference between the two is not just taste, it is money. And the landlord sitting in Oslo with $1.7 trillion under management is not sentimental about cloth. Savile Row has survived world wars. It survived the 1960s, survived Tommy Nutter arriving at number 36 and dressing the Beatles in wide-lapelled, flared trouser suits that turned the Row's own language against it. And it survived the counterculture using bespoke tailoring as its uniform of rebellion. It survived the invention of the business casual dress code and the rise of Silicon Valley hoodies. It may yet survive the Caviar Bar on Burlington Gardens, but it has never had a landlord quite like this one, and the tailors know it.